Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the April meeting of the Essex branch of the Ontario Genealogical Society. We're glad you came out tonight. We think we have an excellent program and speaker for you that you will enjoy. Just a couple of comments. You notice at the bottom of the slide there that's on the screen, we are slowly but surely moving into the technological age. For the last number of months, we have been videotaping our meetings, which are available to members on the members-only website. And part of the rationale behind that is that we have about 75% of our members, about 150 total members, that do not live in the area. So this we felt was a good way of letting them come to the meetings and see what we're doing. So that's what we've been doing. Today we're going one step further. We are trying out for the very first time the live streaming of this particular meeting. So it also would be available as live, obviously, tonight, but it will be recorded at the same time and made available to people who cannot attend tonight, and they can view it after the meeting is over. So how many people here are new to the OGS meetings? Anyone? Welcome. Welcome. Thank you. And your name is?
Ellen.
Thank you, Ellen. And?
Great.
Thanks very much for coming. We hope you enjoy yourself here this evening. Just a quick review of some information related to the branch. You can read these in terms of information. As it says, branches are all over Ontario. So if you have ancestors not only in this area, but in other parts of Ontario, OGS is a very good source to research your family history. So hopefully if you have questions as the meeting goes on and after the meeting is over per se, there'll be time for questions and answers, and we can answer any questions that you might have about your ancestors. The conference, the provincial conference, is coming up very, very shortly. And if you're interested in that, certainly any of this information is available on the website, which is shown there. And if you want to get a flavor for the genealogical research that's available and the resources that you can then check out that website as well. We have our own website, obviously, and you can get more local information from the Essex branch website. Speaking of which, we also are on Facebook. And so if you're into the social media, there are various ways that you can access information about this particular branch. And we hope that we can interest you enough tonight to do some looking into some of the available resources that are existing and shown here. The resources that we have are listed here. We work very closely with the library itself, and in the case of the second bullet there, we do have a collection on the second floor, and Tom Vedic from the library staff is the person who is involved with looking after that collection, and will be able to answer any questions and show you a little bit of that if you come to the library for research. There's a members only section, and that, as I said, requires that you be a member of the Ontario Genealogical Society and then the Essex branch as well, shown with the website for our branch. Upcoming events, I'm not going to say too much about those. You can read them there. At the Tecumseh Historical Museum, there's going to be I guess it's a launch of the Tecumseh Tribune newspapers have all been collected and and cataloged, and now on what form? I guess it's on electronic format anyway. Our next meeting in May, we have another one that's of significance to people doing your family resources. And we will have Veronique Mandel, who is the head of journalism at St. Clair College, very well respected, and is going to talk about the importance and value and significance of newspapers and media of that type in your research, how they can be helpful to you in learning more about your family background and history. In June, for those of you who are interested in United Empire Loyalists, we have a speaker from the bicentennial branch of the United Empire Loyalists here in the area, Linda Eiler, who will be talking a little bit about the experience of UEL settlers who came to this area and some of the early experiences that they had in getting themselves established in the Essex County area. So again, if you have that possibility in your background, you may be interested in that particular meeting. One of the things that we find is that we are not alone, and this is why we're doing what we're doing. There are other branches, subject interest groups as well, such as the Irish Palatine Society and other parts of the OGS that also have webinars, that also have streaming of their meetings. So it's a vast smorgasbord, if you wish, of information that is available to you in a variety of different formats. So please investigate and take advantage of what's available to you. That's important. There is a meeting of the Harrow Early Immigrant Research Society, which is another excellent resource in the area. It's located in the Harrow Arena, and they have one of the better collections in Essex County regarding family research. There is, again, talking about the War of 1812 plaquing event taking place. For information about that particular activity that's taking place on May the 23rd, please go to the information that is there. So lots going on in the area of family history research. And one of the things that we try to do with our meetings, we really look at two things. We look at strategies and techniques and resources that you can learn about to do family history research. But also as part of that, we do have presentations that look at the context in which your ancestors grew up, lived, survived, and so on. I think it's very important that we balance that off with the actual strategies, with knowing what you're looking into in terms of the resources available. So we try to do both, and when we have a speaker on context, they will also talk a little bit about how their particular area of interest can be researched for sure. Okay, the dates for the conference showing there. It's in Barrie, and if you've never been to one, you will be not overwhelmed, but you will be surprised by the amount of information that's available and the opportunity to contact other people who may very well be looking into the same area of the country or the same family or the same name, and you can share ideas and information with them as well. So that is coming up, and it's important to take a look at it. So there's lots of things happening, and we hope that if you see something there that interests you, you will take advantage of that, or before the evening is over, when we have the question period after we finished, approach one of us or approach any of the people in the executive and share your question, and they will certainly do their best to answer and provide you with some information. Okay, tonight we are very pleased to have George Pitfield with us. George comes to us from Sarnia, and we've heard great things about him in terms of presentation. He is a member of the Lambton branch of the OGS. He is a past branch chairman, and at present he is the First Nations resource person for their branch. He's married, his wife Mary, and 2 children, and 4 of the grandchildren keep him busy at most times, as I think we all are experiencing that same sort of thing. In his genealogical research of his own family history, interestingly enough, and I like this because George has a great story to tell, at the age of 59, he found out that he was North American Indian and had First Nations heritage. And he said this is something that never was mentioned to him or spoken of in the family. However, during his life, there were definite signs and indications suggesting that Native heritage was present. His genealogical research had always pointed in the direction of an English heritage, but a surprising find and intensive research brought forth the surprisingly proven data that he and his family ancestors were of First Nations. He is full status Native and belongs to the Anjananan First Nations Territory Reserve in Sarnia. For the past 14 years, he has dedicated himself in the study of Native traditions, culture, and language. He speaks and shares these studies with the Lambton school system, Native communities, genealogical and historical societies. So we're very pleased to have him here tonight. He is the recipient of 2 First Nations awards, the Keeper of the Language, and also Honored Elder. At present, he is a lay minister for the St. Clair United Church, located on the Sarnia Reserve. Please welcome Elder George Pitfield.
Just be a second here. All right, thank you kindly, Jim, for that introduction this evening. Can you all hear me all right? Everybody can hear me? Well, my special thanks to your branch for the invitation to come here tonight. It's the first time I've been here. And looking around, there must be somebody I have seen before, or perhaps seen you at another gathering, a history seminar, genealogy seminar, or maybe you were at the Lambton branch one time. It's hard to say, but I always look around and try to see people that I might have known. My topic this evening is entitled, Do You Know Your Family? And you being genealogist, your answer no doubt would be, of course I know my own family. Why wouldn't I? Who wouldn't know their own family? Well, let me ask you something. Are you sure? Are you absolutely sure you know your family? Well, that's a very bizarre question to ask genealogists, to say the least. Excuse me. But nevertheless, the answer may be as bizarre as the question. My topic tonight reinforces the old adage that things may not be always as they appear, even when certified on paper or stated through trusting family folklore. And no matter how good and precise we do our research, the least little thing can ball us up and send us on a different family research. I'm sure you're all aware of that. You've had that experience once in a while. So tonight, I'm going to share with you a very diverse and bizarre story about my own family research. My research turned out to have a very surprising and incredible turn of events, not to mention the emotional impact that these surprises can bring. I lived 59 years as a white man. His ways, his customs, his beliefs, which I do not regret, I assure you, and discovered that my true heritage was that of a North American Indian, First Nations, Anishinaabe. And the remarkable thing is, had I never entered the fascinating world of genealogy, chances are I might have never found out my true heritage, because no one in my immediate family was going to tell me. However, at various times in my life, through that long trek of life, there were definite signs that Native ancestry was present. And this always promoted a great conversational tidbit. The problem was, I should have looked into it more closely. But why should I? And the astonishing item of my research, there were certified papers, family folklore, incredible proof that my family background pointed in the direction of English heritage. And would end up having me at one point believe that I was totally English. So in starting my new hobby of family research, I knew this venture had all the makings of being interesting, fun, educational, and of course, easy, very easy, because I knew my family. Do you know your family? I was going to become a genealogist. By the way, tell me something. Do you know what a genealogist is? That's a person who confuses the dead while irritating the living. I was wondering if you get that. It should be so noted that my genealogy research was done at first with the aid of all these bloody computers and electronic devices. But my searching was done by the means of the census and the microfiche and the land records, church records, Ontario archives. And along the way, I finally got a computer and got into it. But what should be mentioned here that is very important is when I started using the computers, they didn't have the advanced information that they have today. So that makes a little difference back then when you're researching. Now, when starting my family research, I thought, well, I'll start with my father and mother. First, because I knew my family. I wouldn't even have to look nothing up. Now, researching my dad was quite forward. I knew most of it off by heart, and within an hour I was done. I had it all in black and white. It was done. But there was something about his nickname that really got to me. I'll get back to that on a later part. I should have looked into that again, but then again, why should I? But there was something about his nickname I wasn't too sure of. And there was a slight catch to my mother's birth. I had found in some of the archives and some of the census and other historical data that she was written as being born in more than one place. Like, how many times have we searched and we found they're born here? Oh no, it's over here, it might be here. I found she was born in 10 Mile Point, Howland Township, Manitowoc, Shigwanda, Little Current, and all these little towns located on Manitoulin Island, Kachi, Manitou, Missing. So in questioning my mother about her place of birth, I detected a strong sense of resistance. But finally, she stated her birth was in 10 Mile Point. And the only reason she did that, I think, is because I mentioned 10 Mile Point, so she says, that's what it is. So fine, I had everything together on my mother and dad. I was ready to go. The next area is my granddad. Why? Because I was always told, other genealogists told me, start with your dad and go to his dad and his dad. So that's exactly what I was going to do. Now, not being aware too much about my granddad, I did see a picture of him with his name being George J. His middle initial was J. What the J stood for, I had no idea. Now keep with me in this and keep the J's in mind as we go along. My grandfather was a man I hardly knew. I only met him perhaps 4 or 5 times in my life, but through family research, I thought maybe I could get to know him better. And little did I realize that this man was the main player in solving my family history research. And within a few months, it was quite evident. Researching him would certainly be a challenge. I couldn't surmise what the problem was, but surely somewhere his birth records are attainable, but they weren't. Nowhere could I find them. Now, in researching his family, I find no problems. The grandchildren, the sons, the daughters, the aunts, the uncles, you find everybody. I even found that he was married twice. The first wife who had died, of course, after sickness in the hospital, childbirth, and a second wife he was married to the rest of his life. But now, this one wife's name, De la Monande, is that French? Is that French? Want to agree to that?
Say it again.
De la Monande.
No, Colleen is our French.
Okay, that is a French name. Many people I talk to, that's French. And his second wife also had a French name. So right off the bat, we have French heritage. In other words, there was nothing in those last names that would indicate or suggest that these women were native women. And that's exactly what I thought also. I saw nothing here of native women. Why would I look for that anyways? But here's a little tidbit to remember. I'm sure you're likely aware of this in research in French. The word D in front of the name, I just said De la Monande. I said D. DE means of in French. And back in the 1700s and the 1800s, a lot of French people would put D in front of their names. And the reason for that is they wanted everybody to know that their whole family was of French heritage. Sounds reasonable enough, does it not? But the thing is, if his family come over from the old country to visit, he wanted to make sure they knew they were all French heritage. The thing is, his wife was likely native. And back then, they didn't want people to know that. And that's why the D was there to cover as much up as they could. Now, while I was researching all this, ironically at this time, or perhaps serendipity, my wife was going through an old trunk of my dad's. My dad had passed on and she was going through the old clothes in the old trunk. And she come upon an obituary of my granddad. Something I had extreme difficulty in finding. What a find. You find the obituary of a man you're researching. And I find the J in his name meant Jefferson. Keep that in mind. George Jefferson was his name. Born in Sarnia, Ontario. Died at the age of 84. I had his marriages with dates plus a mention of all his jobs in the area. I had everything I wanted on this man. Now, do we research using obituaries? Do we do that? Of course we do. That's the first thing we look at is obituaries. We find data maybe we never knew of. So this is why we research obituaries. The obituary stated he was married to, as I told you, the first wife and the second wife, and that agreed with what I had before. And the obituary also stated that, much to my surprise, that he was visited during his illness by the Honorable Lester B. Pearson, Prime Minister of Canada, and Premier Ontario Leslie Frost. So my first question is, why would these such esteemed gentlemen visit my grandfather? I had no writings on it. I didn't know. But I surmise now I had something to work on. I had some historical data to go by. And however, even with this welcome data, my main quest was still to prove his birthplace. Something of a mystery and something that was coming utterly impossible. I know it said Sarnia, but you research every place there is in Sarnia, you can't find it. So using the usual mode of family research, I'm looking at George Jefferson. I'm going through everything here. That's what we do. We research the obituaries. And one very dominant and confusing item come up when I researched that name of George Jefferson. He was married to a lady, Caroline Recollet Mayville. Here we are with a different name again. Here we are with a third wife. I started thinking, he's busy, but here's a third different wife. But here the lady has two last names, Caroline Recollet Mayville. And right off the bat, as you well know, Native women sometimes have 2 or 3 last names. The first last name is her maiden name, the second last name is her mother's maiden name, and the third last name is usually her husband's. That's not a rule of thumb, that's just what some of them used to do at one time in the northern area of Ontario. So now, knowing that his name is Jefferson, and he's born in Sarnia, I started my research on him. And in researching my granddad under the name of George Jefferson, I found over and over that this man, George J. Jefferson, was born in New Brunswick, not Sarnia. But the obituary said Sarnia. So the new world of researching took me to Sussex, New Brunswick, where all the Pitfield families originated from Dorset, England, and hence they moved to the Sarnia area. So I knew it was time to call in the heavies. So I sent a letter to the New Brunswick Genealogy Society for any information and direction they could give me. And in a couple of weeks, I received a letter and package from a Mr. Hugh Pitfield of Dorset, England, through the help of the New Brunswick Genealogy Society. And what an eye-opener this was. I didn't even ask for anything of this. He sent me a letter and a package with all the genealogical format of all the Pitfield family in virtually the world. And I must say, I have the utmost respect for this man's work. And he is the man who has dedicated his life in researching families. His 2 books of tables and notes contain more than I could ever amass in my lifetime. And they contain the history of the Pitfields back to 1198. How many here have got back to 1198? Think about that. His research contains us, all the Pitfields of the United Kingdom, United States, Canada, Australia, and all available on his website. And the books also contain his pedigree charts and grid charts and family historical data charts. Excuse me. Yeah, I have them here if you wish to look at them. I put 2 of them up there. I brought them in. Let me see. Now, I couldn't believe that all this data was at my disposal. And my first thought was to look up my grandfather. Remember George J? What does the J stand for? And we said it's Jefferson because that's what the obituary said. Well, I found him. And what a surprise. My grandfather's name was George James. Born in Sarnia, 1876. His wives were Margaret Dilmonday and Nancy Solomon, as I said, as stated in the obituary. I had in my possession a genealogical wonder, something most family researchers would strive to attain. I couldn't believe what I had. I showed writings to these very seasoned researchers in London and Sarnia, plus a professional researcher, and they all agreed my research was done and even compiled. Lo and behold, my genealogy was done. I had everything a researcher could wish for. Everything was in order, everything was accounted for, and everything was in line as it should be, genealogically speaking. So my research is done. I am of English heritage, English ancestry from Dorset, England. I had all the proof I needed and more, but there was still one little small item, my grandfather's birth record. Now, are obituaries always correct? I was starting to wonder about this a little bit. But at this time, with all this writing, the email, and the research, I was in contact there a couple of times with a northern historian who was starting to help me a little bit in my research quest. I had a few things here that I sent her that she wanted also. And she was doing research on families in the northern areas, and I'm sure glad I kept in touch with that lady. But I thought, now since I have everything has fallen into place, I have all my genealogy done, everything accounts for everything. I'm an Englishman. I knew that. Even my name, Pitfield, is English from Dorset, England, and Essex. So I knew I was done. And the wife said, Am I ever glad of that? I don't know what she meant by that. But I sat back and I thought it's time for a well-deserved rest. And this might have been midsummer, and I thought by the time September gets here, I'll enter everything into my family album book. And I had a special book for it, and I was all ready to go. Now, being a genealogist, as you all well know, takes a lot of time and work to find your family. Well, I was once told that if you want to find your family easy and fast, go into politics because your opponents will find them for you. Just seeing if you're awake, that's all. Now, being contented with all the data I had, plus not finding the birth data on my granddad, I was told one time that even family folklore has to take the place of written documents sometimes. So everybody says he's born in Sarnia, that's where he was born. I'll take it, and that's where I'm going to put him down on this. And I did double check all my findings more than just once to make sure everything was above board. Nowhere could I find a major or minor mistake. However, I did find a couple of mixed marriages of native and non-native people, mostly non-native women. And the only thought I had that they were just mixed marriages is you would find anywhere. The men were non-native, and the women were non-native. Now, as circumstances tend to govern our lives, I had purchased a combination history and tourist book about Ontario, Northern Ontario. But the reason why I purchased this book is because it had plenty of landscape pictures, which I wanted. I wanted them downstairs to put in my rec room. I was going to enlarge them and put them on my walls. I liked what they had there. And there were some editorials of the people in the North. I thought, oh, I'll have a look at that after. But when I purchased that book, I didn't buy it for genealogy. I didn't buy it for family research, and I didn't buy it for historical data. I bought it for the pictures, so this is way apart from genealogy. But I must say, this was the best purchase I ever made. Talk about opening up a new horizon on family genealogy. This was the granddaddy of them all. In reading this book, I was very surprised about some of the writings being very formatted and descriptive in connecting my family to the First Nations. Now, how can that be? Let's remember, I have proven my heritage is English. I have all the writings and historical data that a person could possibly need. And I started to think back a little bit about certain experiences in my life that suggested there was Native ancestry in the family. There was numerous hints about this, but I just took them in stride. Why would I even suspect they were true? Remember the lady I mentioned who was a historian, researcher? Well, I don't know why, but that night I contacted her for information about the writings of the book. And also about my granddad. I told her what the book was, what it had said. And she wrote back to me that same night, about 10 to 12 at night. She returned my email and she said, I think I know what your mix-up is. I'll send you his baptismal certificate. Take care, cuz. What's she talking about, cuz? I'm no cousin to you. I don't even know who you are. I've never met you. She's a native woman up north. Like, I don't know who this woman is. And how can she get access to his baptismal certificate when I can't? For 18 years, I searched for it. I can't even get close to it. And what is this mix-up she's talking about? 3 or 4 or 5 days later, I'm not sure, I received the baptismal certificate. Plus, I also received my certification of registration of birth for myself. Have you ever heard of that, certificate of registration of birth? You've heard of birth certificates, but registration of birth? Why should I ask genealogists that? Pardon me. And the registration of birth for Manitoulin District Indian Reserve, Anishinaabeg. It had everything in there. My filing system isn't always the best, so stay with me. And after reading these papers 6 or 7, 10, 20, or how many times, I don't know, I was convinced a whole new avenue concerning ancestry and descendants was starting to emerge. The baptismal certificate of my grandfather, it's on the white card there, you can read that. The baptismal certificate of my granddad stated his name was George Henry Mayville, not Pitfield. That's why I couldn't find him. But I have noticed his name is George James Henry also. So now I have my granddad. But on the side of the certificate was the word illegitimate, which tells me that when he was baptized, his parents were not married. That was Caroline and George Jefferson. This is George James we're talking about. Now, Caroline was from the Upper St. Clair Reserve. And since she was not married to George Jefferson through the Christian rules of wedlock, the clergyman put down illegitimate. Now, this doesn't rule out they weren't married. They could have been married through the old-fashioned Indian way by means of a medicine man or a medicine woman. However, through research, I did find in the Salt Lake City archives a marriage of George Jefferson and Caroline Recollet, and this marriage might have taken place after the baptismal of George James. Now, this lady died in 1855 when my grandfather was about 8 years old. And he and his half-brother, he had a half-brother, William, were taken up to Killarney and taken in by Catholic missionaries. Now, another reason I couldn't find him, he wasn't on the Upper St. Clair Reserve, he was on the Enniskillen Reserve outside Betroya, the Sugar Bush. This is about 16 miles from Sarnia. But now the certificate of registration of birth of myself had very questionable data to consider. And I'm glad this lady sent it to me because I would have never sent away for this. I would send away for a birth certificate. And under the heading of racial origin for both my father and mother were the words white, as in white man, scratched out, and the word British written in, scratched out, and the word Canadian written on it. Now, people, when I tell them that, they don't believe me. They said, that is a record from the government. Nobody scratches that out and writes anything else in. All right? And it's on the whiteboard there if you want to have a look at that after. Now, the thing about this certificate of registration of birth, when you get to the very bottom of it, it shows who your parents are and where they're from. I found my dad from the Manitoulin District Reserve, and I found my mother from Shigwanda, Manitoulin District Reserve. I found exactly where they're from. Right?
Yep, correct.
Now, with all this new information, it was like going to bed as a white man and waking up as a red man the next day. Everything had totally changed. And these certificates proved to be a revelation in my family research, and as a whole new world of information started to unfold. Now, I started to find family I never knew I had. Remember the woman who called me Cuz, the historian? Well, she was my cousin. It was her house that she lives in where my dad was raised. I never knew that. Now, the main question as we speak here, how did everything evolve into English heritage perfectly and the native heritage was never found anywhere? I went through everything. You can look at those books. You can look at the sheets, the birth certificates. Everything goes right up the line English. Now, remember the obituary. It had more wrong information in that than you could shake a stick at. And it had my grandfather's name, of course, incorrect. And when I researched the incorrect name, it took me into the Pitfield family of England. And the family album from England reinforced the family research to a T. There were no names that implied native ancestry was present, nowhere. There might have been French names, but there was no native names. When people got married, married another man, woman, the Pitfield name carried on, but that doesn't sound native at all, does it? Nowhere in the census, when you look up in the census, you look at this next time. When you open that big census book, you've got your names, you've got your dates, and where, who, what, where, and why. But when it comes to racial origin, where is it? It's way over here in a small little slit that nobody reads. Sometimes it might say F for French or N for native, and sometimes it will not. But the next time you're going through the census, just go over there a little bit and go down there. And you see if they have it in there. Some people don't even do that. I'm the worst one also. Nothing in the research ever implied that native ancestry was present. Although there was a record of mixed marriages of native and non-native, but how did it imply at the time? A mixed marriage, a lot of people have that. In essence, my whole family, ancestors, descendants, are First Nations people, Anishinaabe, with a little hint of English from the late 1800s. Now, for your information, remember the obituary stated that the Prime Minister of Canada and the Premier of Ontario visited my granddad. Well, even that was incorrect. They were in Clarny to honor his wife, my step-grandmother, Nancy. Now, my step-grandmother, Nancy, was affectionately known as Aunt Nancy, the angel of mercy, and she brought no fewer than 500 babies into the world without even losing one. She also doctored the sick, the injured, and even buried the dead. And in the summer, when people could get up to the Sudbury Hospital, doctors were amazed at the talents of Nancy. They never had to reset any bones or even restitch any wounds that Nancy had repaired. And this little town of Clarny, roughly 500 to 600, as long as I can ever remember, is in the middle of rugged mountains and water. And they managed to survive years of isolation because of the medical talents and benevolence of Aunt Nancy, my step-grandmother. Let's keep in mind, this town didn't have hydro until 1951. And it wasn't until 1962 that a road finally was constructed and opened up to the main highway, number 69, about 25 miles north of Sudbury. But if you ever go up that road, it's a long 40 miles, Bailey bridges and all. Aunt Nancy, by the way, she did train as a nurse in a Winnipeg hospital. Now, my story is not rare. Believe it or not too long ago, I've talked to 2 or 3 fellows that have had the same experience. This is not unheard of sometimes. Our heritage gets lost. But last Thursday, I was in shopping. Of all things, I'm talking to a friend of mine I used to work with. And he was telling me about his son-in-law attending a family reunion. And he found out his mother was native and that he was native. Now, he might be 47, 48 years old. So you see, this happens a lot. Now, I take my heritage very serious. I do take part in certain native traditions, ceremonies, and I have learned about different societies in the native world that are very structural in the native world. I have spoken to dedicated medicine men and medicine women who are leaders of each community in their own right. And these experiences have taught me one special item. I should have followed up those growing up signs of being native that were before me. I should have taken some time and looking into it. My dad's nickname was Wabi. That means the whitest of his brothers. I should have looked that up. And here's something of interest here. Kind of got to me. It made me stop and think after I received my full status. I was very excited. It was something new to me, and of course, I wanted to share my good news to everyone, all my friends. And the wife and I were shopping in Sears, and we met an old friend from younger years and who grew up with us through life. And in the conversation, my wife told her, she says, George has found his native heritage, and he's a full status native now. Our friend replied, that's nothing new. I knew that for years. How did she know that for years? Well, I found out it's her dad and my dad were good friends. I think that's how she found out. But it surprised me. It took me off guard. My native name is Migwans, which means little feather, given me by a woman who was a very good friend of mine and who was a recognized senior elder of the Ontanan community. And now that I know researching the structure of Native society, which is a little trick, I have found new ancestors with very interesting backgrounds in history. Charles Wapoose, known as the Rabbit, well, but Wapoose is rabbit, so they nicknamed him the Rabbit. He received gifts from the Queen for his noted involvement in the War of 1812 in the St. Clair River in Sarnia. I have him on the boards here. Nancy Mayville, Nee Wapoose, heritage medicine woman of the Sarnia Chippewas. Jean-Baptiste Laforge, noted builder and pioneer of the city of Sarnia. Etienne de la Morande, noted builder and pioneer of the town of Killarney. Sassagonaquah, woman of the falling snow. Now, Sassagonaquah was the niece and adopted daughter of Chief Beshikin, Chief Big Gun, and a close relative of the famous Shawnee chief Tecumseh. Does that make me related to him somehow? I like to think so. Now, in closing, I've been studying the native language for the past 14 years, and I can say it's not the easiest thing I have ever done. Each tribe, each native community has their own language, some different, some almost the same as ours, different dialects, but all native languages on Turtle Island are canonized by the Algonquin tongue. Turtle Island, of course, you know, is North America. For example, let me give you an example of this. The word Benuji, that means baby. The Algonquin language canonization meaning is an uplifting spirit. Well, a baby is an uplifting spirit. Now let me ask you this. Do you know what the Kimosabi means? You remember the Lone Ranger in Tonto? Kimosabi, you remember that? Well, this is what Tonto always called the Lone Ranger. Perhaps different native communities would have different dialects in their meaning, but the Algonquin language meaning of Kimosabi is the one who looks in secret. That's the true meaning of that word. So the next time you watch the Lone Ranger, you'll know what it means. But camping out one time, Tonto and the Lone Ranger were out at a camp, getting ready to go fight crime, I guess, in the morning or whatever it is they do. And about 3:30 in the morning, the Lone Ranger, he wakes up Tonto. He says, Tonto, wake up. So Tonto wakes up, he says, what wrong, Kimosabi? And the Lone Ranger says, look at all the stars, Tonto. It tells me that there's lots of worlds out there. It tells me there's more worlds to explore. What does it tell you, Tonto? Tonto say, tell me, Kimosabi, you stupid white man. Somebody stole our tent. I had to tell you that. Well, perhaps my talk this evening might have mixed you up somewhere, or or I didn't explain something that clear. If so, any questions you might have, I'll try to answer them. Oh, I know something now. Okay, go ahead. Do you have any questions at all?
Colleen?
Go ahead.
How did you get the name Pitfield?
The question is, how did I get the name Pitfield? When my grandfather was baptized, George Mayville, I'm sure that George Jefferson Pitfield was there at the time. But maybe because they weren't in the proper rules of wedlock at the time, the preacher, whoever it was, put illegitimate down. But they did get married in Salt Lake City. So when he was taken up north to the Catholic missionaries, they wanted the name of the man who fathered him.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else? How long, am I okay here? Am I getting too long? It'll just be another 5.
Well, no problem. No, it was lots of time. Lots of time.
I mentioned to you there were certain aspects going through life that were pushing Native ancestry at me. There were numerous hints on this, but I remember when my father died, my mother wanted him buried in a special plot in the cemetery, and they wouldn't do it because they were filled. And she was quite irate over that, and I found out later the special place was a Native burial place, something I never knew back then. But one thing that brought me to life too, my wife, after we'd been married 6 or 7 months, she went for a trip up north with her mom and dad to Manitoulin Island, and she got quite sick with food poisoning. They took her into the Little Current Hospital. And my wife told me for 3 days as she lay there, there was a Native woman sitting beside her just over by the wall. Whatever my wife would need, that woman would get it for her. We don't know who she was, but she knew who my wife's last name was. One night I was working overtime at a chemical plant in Sarnia, and we all decided we're going to drop into a local watering hole and have some Canada Dry. It was about 9 or 10 o'clock at night, so we thought we'd go in. And we sat there enjoying our silly pop, and there was a Native woman and Native man come in and sat with us. Because back in those days, instead of having a table with just 4 chairs, it'd be something like this, 2 tables like this. You could set 18 or 20 people there. And let's face it, after you're in there for a while, everybody's your friend. But the Native woman said to me, "What is your name?" And I told her. And she looked at me surprisingly, and I couldn't figure out what the problem was. And she says, he come up from Walpole Island to the Sarnia Reserve. She knew who my great-granddad was. And the man leaned over to me and he said, "I know who you are, and you're not a white man." And right off the bat, I thought, what is wrong with these people? Of course, everybody at the table's laughing and laughing, but those were just little signs that were evident that I should have picked up on. Okay, now, no other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Were there any resources that you tapped into in Windsor as far as to getting help? Like, I was adopted, and I know the clan I'm from, but I don't know where to go from there. Like, I have just no clue.
Okay, if you're going to research Native ancestry, a lot of people go through the census looking for that special name, but let's remember, first of all, Newman, say the word Newman. It's N-E-W. In Native, it's N-I-I-W. 2 I's are our E's and an O is our U and so forth. So if you're looking for Native names in there, it's going to be awful hard unless you're after the 1911s. So for you to do is to look up the cemeteries and the death notices. That's how we go back to find the children, the mom and dad, is through the death notices. That's the only way we can find that. Because a lot of times the names are very misconstrued.
Now, I do know biological mother, she was half Native. It was her mom, was pure Native. Her dad wasn't Native.
Okay, I'll tell you how this works. if your mother is full native, your dad is full native, you will be given a status card called a 6-1. So if one is maybe half and the other is full, you would only get a 6-2. And anything after that is void.
Oh, okay.
You have to either be the 6-1 or 6-2 in order to get native status. And you have to be recognized by some reserve that your grandmother or your mother was on. Okay? It's a little tricky there, but the names are the things that get people mixed up. No other questions? Well, then I thank you all to your branch for inviting me here this evening, and I'm sure you have enjoyed, and I have enjoyed myself greatly. I see some new people here and meet some new people here, and I do look forward to seeing you all in the future. Now, as a custom in our native traditions similar to this evening of gathering and sharing our heritage, we always end in a small native prayer. So in prayer, just Nungon sang miwa de begizis wasayam the motion wanayayan nabot sandam mikwach wendum is in the door. For the stars, for the moon that shine and guide my path, I pray and I thank you, Creator. Amen. To all of you, Kwawag, Miwa, Ninewag, ladies and gentlemen, Gibi Zayak, Gizgat, thank you for coming today. Gibi Zayak, Bazinmek, thank you for listening. Yan, Mena, Gizgat, have a good day. Miigwech, thank you.
Thank you very much for a wonderful presentation, interesting information, and things that I think some of the people have indicated they will follow up on. But I appreciate you coming down and giving us this presentation today.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very kindly.
Okay, we are now formally adjourned.
Oh, just wait, I have some tips,
Okay,
as long as I can get them back up. Oh, maybe not.
hold on a second.
Okay.
But this is a minute of all good water. It's not Skoda of all fire water.
Everyone. Okay, got this. Okay, then. And then talk into the microphone. Okay, all right. Yeah, good. I will.
Okay, folks.
22 people.
If you have any questions or want to speak with George about anything or review the boards that are available here, please do so. We have lots of time. We don't have to be out of here for an hour. So
I really would like to thank Jill coming down from the Chatham area. She's with the Kent branch to help with the streaming. Michelle's been assisting, and David, our web folks, have been helping. Steve is on backup in Niagara, so he's watching as well, and he's been texting with Jill. He mentioned that there's over 20 people watching right now. 22 people that are on. So thank you very much, folks, for joining us online. And we look forward, if you want to go on our Facebook or send us an email, we'd love to hear back the feedback of what you thought and, you know, how the first streaming went. So a big, big thank you. And hopefully we'll be able to continue on with this. It seemed to go okay. Jim mentioned about our Facebook group that we have. And I want to, you know, toot the horn of our Facebook group because I think it's a fantastic resource. A lot of the branches have Facebook, so if you're not using Facebook, it's a great genealogical tool. You should be adding it to your toolbox. On our Facebook group, people share things. And one person that shares quite often is Philip Gross. He's a branch member. So the other day he put something up there about just reminding people about the atlases and that what you can find. So I went on, and that's the website, the homepage. And if you can actually search people there, and they'll go into the surnames, or you can search maps, and it brought up some fantastic maps of all the townships. So that's a really great resource. And that conversation, I'll go into the next one. that conversation. Another lady that's also on our Facebook is Cindy Foreman. She also reminded us about maps as well, that she found some great maps at the Archives of Ontario. Now, I tried to copy her link, but the page kept saying it expired. So I did a Google search. Google's your best friend as well. Google everything. So I did a Google search, and it took me to the first link, and it took me right to the archives, and the same thing. There were actual images of the township. So just 2 little tips to take away, that they're 2 good websites that you can use. And that's
Put it on the last page so we can get that website.
the last one back. Sure.
Please.
Betty, you need to join our Facebook group. And Jim also mentioned about the other branches that are doing streaming like this. Just a word, you do not need to be an OGS member to take advantage of some of the things that are going on. OGS is really trying to embrace the Family History Society, get the word out, encourage the public. A lot of the branch websites are open to the public. Go snoop around. They have databases, they have indexes. So if you have folks in Niagara, go snooping on the Niagara, on the Brant, on the Norfolk, you might find something there. And their meetings are streamed as well. And it's not always about just their area. Last week, Niagara had a great one about new ways to look at old tombstones. So I joined in on that, and there was some really great tips on different angles of taking the picture of the camera to get the lettering to come out. So it wasn't pertaining Niagara specifically, which I don't have any ancestors there, but it was just a basic family history, live stream. So be sure to take advantage of them. They're available to everybody. So other than that, now that's all I have to say.
Thanks, Cindy.
So thanks for joining us, everybody, and thanks to the folks online.
Facebook page is awesome.
Well, thank
The
you.
maps that you talked about,
Yeah.
I was able to get my great grandfather's where he lived, his lot